The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation, founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.
Hello, this is Morgan Halgren. For 16 seasons, Living in Iowa told the tale of what it means to be uniquely Iowan. Tonight, we honor that spirit by bringing you another glimpse into our rich heritage with a few stories from our archives. In this episode of The Best of Living in Iowa, we talk with political veteran Minnette Doderer, who spent nearly 4 decades serving the people of Iowa and epitomized the saying, "A woman's place is in the House and the Senate." We profile Iowa's own music man, Meredith Willson, and take a wild ride on a Doodle Bug motor scooter.
January in Iowa means the start of another legislative session. As the lawmakers assemble in Des Moines, we'll take time out to remember an influential member who passed away in 2005. When Minnette Doderer was a freshman legislator in 1964, she was one of only 3 women members. This year, 25 women will take their seats in the House. And that's just one of the many accomplishments for which the 36-year veteran from Iowa City should be given credit.
In a back hallway just a few steps away from the Iowa House of Representatives, 2 state officials are discussing important business.
Have your clerk just follow up.
Which of them has recently been called one of the most important people ever to serve in the Iowa legislature?
And now they found out it was easy to get money, they're going to do it again.
That's right, the woman. She's broken all the stereotypes of what legislative power looks like. She's short, liberal, and female.
How many of these have happened recently that we think have gotten away without prosecution? And what was the misdemeanor that they committed and they got away with?
Her name is Minnette Doderer, Democrat from Iowa City. And after 36 years as a political leader, she's retiring.
Teacher or administrator.
Over the course of her career, Minnette's careful consideration has shaped nearly every law on the books. She says fairness is her bottom line, and that has translated into legislation that has equalized laws for men, women, and children, businesses small and large, and citizens rural and urban. We met Minnette at the Law Library in the Capitol building to talk about her career.
Well, you have had a long and distinguished career, and we'd like to kind of go back and look a little bit at the whole career. So let's go back to 1964 and tell us what it was like to be a freshman legislator at that time.
Scary. It really was scary. Well, being a freshman wasn't as bad as being a freshman woman legislator. There were 3 women in the House of 124 people, and they were not impressed with the women. They were not unimpressed with the women. We just weren't there in their heads. You know, when we got the vote, it took more years for them to amend the Constitution and allow us to run for office and get elected. The good old boys were not necessarily good old boys.
What advice did those good old boys give you?
Oh, one wonderful man from Dubuque, John Shanahan, I think his name was. He had been the longest serving legislator, and I had just come from the university, and I went over to John one day and I said, "John, is it really true that freshmen should be seen and not heard?" And he drew a bead on me and he said, "Mrs. Doderer, if I were you and I had something to say, I'd say it now because you won't be back."
Oh, really?
It was the best advice I got.
Several people that we interviewed described you as the conscience of the House. Do you feel you have played that role?
Well, I never thought of it that way, and I'm not sure what the conscience is. But once I take a stand on an issue like reapportionment or the Equal Rights Amendment or choice for women who have unwanted and dangerous pregnancies, yes, I've stood firm on them, and I've tried to articulate what those women have said to me. Actually, I didn't know anything about these women's issues when I went into the legislature, nothing. And women came to me. And I believe in equality.
But I read where you said you became a feminist inch by inch.
Yeah. by other people's stories and telling me how disadvantaged they were. So they woke me up.
And just you continued to hear from your constituency about just the whole gamut of problems.
Constituency across the state, because there were so few women in there that they could talk to. And once I got a reputation for listening, hey, I heard a lot of things.
Iowa has been reasonably progressive about women's rights, but still there are no women who have held the very highest offices. Why do you think that is?
Because women aren't risking running for higher office. And if you have the, the degree, the grades, you're smart enough, and that took me a while to figure out, hey, I'm not only smart as some of them, I'm smarter than some of them. And that wasn't knocking them, it's just that they hadn't done their background work.
Well, now, when you're very involved with an issue, and let's say it doesn't go the way you want it to, how do you let it go? Because this is you have to deal with it all the time, I'm sure. So what do you do?
I don't let it go. Because every time you fight an issue, you educate more people. And pretty soon it happens.
What are the issues that you're going to be sorry to not be able to make decisions on?
Well, insurance. Women now are charged more for their health insurance than men are charged for their health insurance. Why is that? Because it's habit.
You have left your mark on many, many laws that have been passed. Which are the laws that you are most pleased with and proudest of?
Well, that's very hard because there's so many of them. But I like the ones where I've helped the underdog. And I have to say the ones I've done for women and children. I've done adoption laws, I've done division of property in divorces. Reapportionment helps everyone because the majority view prevails.
And why did you decide to retire now?
It's so many reasons, I'm not even sure. If I hadn't blurted it out one day in caucus, I might have even decided not to. But once it's out there, many people have asked me to back up and run again, but I can't do that, because I should retire. I'd hate to spoil my reputation as a hard worker by staying one term too long.
Now, Minnette Doderer is ready to be Lieutenant Governor.
This old television commercial from one of Minnette's 2 races for lieutenant governor reminds us of how much times have changed. Minnette has spent her life reminding us that change doesn't just happen, someone has to make it happen. She leaves us with fair inheritance tax laws, rape laws, juvenile justice laws, and a list that goes on and on.
Do it November 3rd. Vote for Doderer. Do it, do it, do it. Vote Doderer.
But according to Representative Pam Yoakum from Dubuque, she has also left a living legacy.
Minnette was a woman who stood out that told the rest of us that politics and holding public office was something that we could do. And she's been a pioneer for women in this state. She's paved a lot of new roads for us and opened a lot of doors. And for that, many of us are very thankful.
This week, we're excited to tell you the story of a man whose work we've enjoyed for decades. He's Meredith Willson, a man whose talents and musical genius sent him rubbing elbows with the elite in the music world, but who never lost his Iowa-friendly personality or forgot his hometown of Mason City. In fact, he immortalized it. One of America's favorite musicals is a comedic look at Iowa called The Music Man.
We got trouble! Oh, we got trouble! Right here in River City! Right here in River City! With a capital T and that rhymes with P and that stands for pool.
When it hit Broadway in 1957, it broke box office records and became one of the longest-running plays in history. A few years later, it became a hit Hollywood film.
Shaboopy, shaboopy, shaboopy.
And although almost everyone knows the story of a flim-flam man gone sweet on a small-town Mary and the Librarian, and most Americans can sing along with at least 1 or 2 songs from the show, few know anything about the man who wrote it.
Rosemary, my dear wife.
He was Meredith Willson from Mason City, Iowa, and his legacy will surprise you. He influenced American culture throughout the 20th century and was for some decades a household name. And even though he lived a life of celebrity, he never forgot his hometown roots. Born in 1902, Meredith was the youngest of 3 children. Willson described his early years with enthusiasm, telling of a home where costumes, music, and theater were part of everyday life.
I was always involved with music, some part of every day, that through my dear sainted mother, and I thought, didn't everybody, you know?
But according to his biographer, John Skipper, Meredith's relationship with his father was not necessarily as idyllic as Willson sometimes described it.
It was probably not the happiest of households. And Willson said that in his father's life, he never, ever uttered Meredith's name. He never called his son by name in his entire life, which is hard to believe, hard to understand, and contradicts a lot of the anecdotal things that Meredith said growing up. But when you're doing an interview in the twilight of your life, sometimes the truth surfaces a little more.
Perhaps the tension at home gave Meredith the motivation to leave his much-loved hometown immediately after high school. He traveled to New York City to continue his musical education at what is now Juilliard School of Music. He was such a good musician that at age 18, he was hired as first flutist in one of the most popular bands in the nation, the band of John Philip Sousa. After a few years of traveling with Sousa, Meredith decided to settle down with his new wife, Elizabeth, so he joined the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. His next position was with the Seattle Symphony, and he also lived in San Francisco. But soon he was drawn to Southern California, where he would make his mark in the new medium of radio.
The National Broadcasting Company presents The Big Show.
He had a fabulous career, particularly in radio, before the Music Man was even ever thought of. He was the musical director of NBC Radio for years and years. And back in those days, there was no television. So if you were the musical director of NBC Radio, you were the musical director of NBC.
You're about to be entertained by some of the biggest names in show business. Such bright stars as...
Fred Allen. Groucho Marx.
Ginger Rogers.
Meredith Willson.
And my name, darlings, is Tallulah Bankhead.
By the 1950s, Meredith Willson was a household name. He had been a familiar voice on many a hit radio show and had even written some hit songs. But he was about to become even more famous.
Our story starts back in 1912 in a little Iowa town called River City.
For Meredith Willson, songwriting was easy. He could come up with a musical lick while shaving and produce an entire song by the time he got to work. But writing the entire play and all the songs for the Music Man took him nearly 6 years of concerted effort. It was probably one of the hardest things he ever did.
76 trombones led the big parade with 110 cornets close at hand.
He and his second wife, Renee, a trained opera singer, auditioned the 3-hour show over and over to everyone from the secretaries at the office to Broadway's top producers.
Trouble, trouble, right here, say trouble right here, River City with a capital T, rhymes with P and that stands for cool.
He rewrote song after song and eventually cut out some of his favorite characters before the story settled into its now familiar shape. Finally, his creation came to life and has continued to hit the right notes ever since.
Good night, my someone. Good night, my love.
Shirley Jones starred as Marian the Librarian in the 1962 film of Meredith's musical.
I think The Music Man, it's just so appealing to all Americans, probably to the world now. But I mean, it's just so American. It's an American classic, that's what I call it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Music Man.
It's one of those shows that's just going to go on and on and on. I do concerts all over the country now, as I've been doing here, and I have to tell you, most of what I have done is Rodgers and Hammerstein, because I did the 2 films for Rodgers and Hammerstein music. But the most requested across the country is the Music Man. He was a musical genius.
While The Music Man is the play most commonly associated with Meredith Willson, in his lifetime he wrote more than 400 songs. Many of them were recorded by some of the biggest names in showbiz.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
From Bing Crosby to Debbie Reynolds.
So if you go from nowhere on the road to somewhere and you meet anyone, you know it's me.
To the Beatles.
There was love all around, but I never heard it singing. No, I never heard it at all till there was you.
And he also wrote this one.
May the good Lord bless and keep you, whether near or far away. May you find that long-awaiting golden day today, and so on.
And there's something else you may not know about Meredith Willson. Throughout his career, he collaborated with Hollywood's top directors and producers. Willson was nominated for an Academy Award for writing the musical score for this film, The Great Dictator, Charlie Chaplin's first talkie. With a career that gave him access to everyone from studio heads to American presidents, Meredith Willson never lost his connections with his hometown in Iowa. According to Mason City historian Art Fishbeck, Willson always shared his fame with his hometown.
The one thing he started doing right from the beginning was mentioning Mason City in every radio broadcast. And that carried on throughout, even through the end of the big show.
From all accounts, Meredith didn't just talk about loving Iowa, he really felt strongly about his roots.
I keep on coming back because I love Iowa. I owe Iowa. I love Iowa people. I have memories in Iowa that will never be erased. I never knew an Iowan who wasn't proud of his Iowa. And you're looking at one right here.
Meredith Willson passed away in 1984. But even today, the people of Mason City enjoy fond remembrances of him.
He just was Iowa-friendly, we would say.
Now, do you know what I just discovered? That you like butter.
We really enjoyed him. Basically, he was just a good, down-to-earth person. You felt very comfortable with him. And they say that all the things that they write about him is everybody was his cousin, and I feel that's true.
Iowa. It's a beautiful name when you say it like we say it back home.
There are many delightful stories about Meredith's visits to Iowa. Ann Swanson's father was a childhood friend of Meredith's. Her family visited with Willson often, even going to his home in Hollywood. When Ann's father passed away, Meredith and his third wife, Rosemary, became even closer to the Swanson family.
Our youngest daughter, who at that time was about 7 years old, wrote to Meredith and asked if he would be interested in being her grandfather because she no longer had a grandfather. He wrote back and said he would be honored to be a substitute grandfather. So for years, until he died, actually, he remembered her at birthdays and Christmas, and so it was very special.
With dozens of personal connections like this one, Meredith's legacy remains alive and well in Mason City. So much so that the Mason City Foundation has raised more than $10 million to develop a campus which includes Meredith Willson's boyhood home and this building called Music Man Square, which is not only a museum and a tourist destination, but also a center for music education. So in the community where he was born more than 100 years ago, Meredith Willson's legacy lives on. And even though Meredith Willson may no longer be a household name, his songs and musicals will continue on as an irreplaceable part of Americana.
For our Remember When segment, we'll scoot over to Webster City for a look at some doodle bugs. At one time, there were over 40,000 of these two-wheeled wonders, but today few remain. Their owners, however, still think they're great.
A Doodle Bug is a motorized scooter, and they were built here in Webster City in 1946, 47, and 48, right after World War II.
$68 when they first started. Nobody could really come out and say that you could spend that much money, and that was, you know, that's almost a month's wages sometimes.
After the war, you couldn't hardly find any kind of motorized vehicle, so they put these on the market as a cheap, low-cost transportation.
Well, they never thought they'd ever sell 40,000 of these things in 3 years.
Got together and decided that maybe we would try a Doodle Bug reunion.
Oh, these have won in the past. I've been to this meet for, I guess this is 7th year. And the first couple of years that we were here, we had, I think, 3 running Doodle Bugs. I mean, it was almost a nondescript meeting, but it keeps growing and it keeps becoming more fun.
By test driving, we took them out every day. I kept a log of my mileage, and I rode 7,720 miles over the 2 summers. That's 100 miles a day average. So that's a lot of miles on a Doodle Bug. Every girl in town wanted to ride these things, you know. I had races with the trains. I never could beat them.
When are you ever going to grow up?
Never, never grow up. Not with a toy like this.
The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation. Founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.